Thank you for the opportunity here to talk to you today. Actually, following up Jerry is good timing for me. We don't use silicon carbide, but we do manufacturing using silicon and glass wafers. And I understand the complexities of what his company does, and let me tell you, it's not easy to get that done. We have a slightly different approach here. We're moving from the sensor world into deploying it into a system, and I'll describe kind of those pieces. The company went public here in the ASX about 2.5 years ago, and I came on board about 1.5 years ago as we were really starting to ramp this business pretty significantly. We're riding that on the back of IoT, and it's an overused term, but it is creating quite a bit of, I'll call it silicon usage and sensor usage, which is what we're interested in doing. You can see by the graph here, very simply, is in sensors, the market was about $5 billion last year, and then moving up to about $18 billion. So the growth rate is very high. With the number of devices necessary to get to about 51 billion. And what type of sensors am I talking about? Very simply on the right-hand side are things that detect things like liquids and temperature, location, and then it's tied into some sort of software platform that gives you data and information to act on accordingly. Some examples of that on the consumer side of things are thermometers like that you would use in your home, like the Nest thermometer, Wi-Fi doorbells, those type of things are sort of driving it on the consumer side. Our interest is, again, more on the industrial side, and we'll talk through what that means for us. As a small company, we're trying to take on quite a bit, and we sort of have 3 pieces of the pie that we're going after. We're building the actual sensors themselves, and then we're trying to network those sensors and then have data processing insights based on the information that those sensors generate. So the whole stack that you see there on the side of the screen, are all areas that we're actually touching as we go through it. We were originally went public here with the idea that we were going to be driving mostly the MEMS-based sensors. So that's sort of the base, the very bottom of the pyramid there. And but what we've done is through acquisition, we've actually grown now and are building all these pieces into vertical markets, which I'll describe to you. We're located in 2 locations besides here in Australia, but the key design locations are outside of Boston, Massachusetts in the US and in Berlin, Germany. The fab where we've actually produced the MEMS type products that produce our sensors are in the Boston area, and we're primarily targeting with that group is medical technology. If you know the US market, the Boston market is kind of the heartbeat of that end market. So it makes sense for us to be there locally. And then the what we call IoT Solutions Group is the group that kind of builds out a network of sensors for various applications, and the 2 primary applications don't sound very synergistic, but are livestock health and mining, and I'll walk you through why that sort of works for us. Both of these groups, again, have had over a decade of R&D that were done prior to the IPO. And so there's the benefit for the investors today of all of that work that's been done, that we now have products that we're selling out into the marketplace. So when we talk about the 2 pieces, if you look at what we call micro devices, this is the MEMS design and manufacturing group. Again, just pictorially, you can see that we have a wafer fab in Boston that's shown down here in this picture, just to give you a physical sense of what that looks like. We produce either glass or silicon-based wafers, and then the sensors are what are processed to develop that. That end product, will go into or that MEMS sensor will go into some sort of a product. In this case, we show you what we call point-of-care medical devices, things like blood monitors, heart pumps, or nebulizers. And what they are doing is essentially measuring flow of blood or other liquids, any kind of DNA materials that will be essentially detected by the MEMS device. We're just now starting to ramp into volume production into a couple of these areas. The most well-known design that we have been producing is a heart pump in conjunction with a company called Abiomed, which is the world's largest heart pump producer. And we're starting again to see that revenue ramp right now. The nebulizers and blood monitors will be those type of products will be coming out sort of later in the beginning of the fiscal year 20. We also are doing kind of advanced research with local universities, MIT and Harvard, on devices that are called lab on a chip or organ on a chip. And that's sort of, again, future revenues that are probably out in the fiscal year 21. And they are essentially devices that you would use if you went to a doctor's office to do some analysis if you had some issues. So you can do real-time analysis instead of having to go into a hospital, into a long-term care type environment. This is a revolutionary change. It's ongoing. We have about 6 different customers in which we're producing devices on that are doing things like emulating livers, emulating gallbladders, things like that. And it's a pretty progressive way to go. The core technology inside a device like this is the MEMS product that we produce. So again, we sort of look at this as future revenues out quite a ways. If I look at the other part of the business, just to sort of give you an example, besides just building sensors for a medical technology field, we can still use that same technology to build other types of sensors. A good example is we're in the midst of building a gas sensor today that is battery powered and very, very small. And that same sensor would get put into what's called a tag. The technology that the Berlin team has is, from a sensing perspective, is they can measure location to a very precise degree. So if I move this glass from here to here, it can detect that. And what you want to do is combine those type of sensors with others, as I just mentioned, for instance, gas, or other type of liquid or temperature, things like that, in order to come up with a complex set of data, which then can be used to do analytics on certain things. And I'll walk you through 2 examples of how we do that. The tag itself communicates with what we call an anchor. It's very similar to your Wi-Fi network that you would have somewhere, where you would have a Wi-Fi, what's called a base station. This is a unique and different technology. The RF is highly robust, and it has all the tags talk to itself as well as the anchors, and so it makes it very usable in kind of harsh environments. Then that goes to an edge server network that you see here, where more analytics is done, and either we do it on premises or in the cloud. So this whole chain is what we're producing. And so this is pictorially, again, the products themselves. So if you stay on the left-hand side, on the sensor side, those chips that we developed there are the location type of products that are then integrated into an RF module, which are integrated into a tag. And those tags, again, can be various different type of packaging, depending on the need. So for instance, this here is used in a medical or hospital type environment. This is a mining environment based on the package, et cetera. It connects again to the anchors. And then there are sometimes some very specific type products built off of this. So this again in mining is a vehicle tag that is in a very harsh environment. But the fundamental is you've got a sensor. That sensor is networked with the wireless technology, and then it runs through and is run through the analytics. So so we do kind of all those pieces all the way through. I'm going to skip this. So Big picture for us on the growth of the company is that when we went public, we were very, very small. And then last year, in fiscal year 18, is really when we started to sell these products in some meaningful fashion. And then this year, as we end this year, and at the end of June here, we'll be at about 11 million US dollars in revenue. So fiscal year 19 was about revenue growth and getting to profitability. So we're going out of the year, the last 2 months or so of the year, that we will be operating profitably. And in fiscal year 20, we'll continue to see revenue growth here, and then also operate on a profitable level throughout the whole year. One of the key drivers of that for us has been we've been building up our sales pipeline, and this is just a kind of high-level view of that, which says we currently have brought in about $30 million of revenue potential, new opportunities that are going to drive sort of late fiscal year 20 into fiscal year 21. If I looked at this pipeline a year ago, it was a third of this. So it's, we've had significant growth here, which is going to continue to help us grow this business moving forward. The customer base has also grown. So we've gone from about half a dozen customers on the MEMS side to a dozen. In the rest of the business, we've gone from about 20 customers to 30 customers. So we're back about over 50 customers at this point. And some of the names up here are some of the key ones that we deal with. We tend to sell into system integrators that tend to pull together other pieces of either sensors or software technology for an end solution to an end market solution. So let me give you just a little bit of exactly how we sell into a market. So if I look at the mining market today, the way we have essentially entered into this market is to use our location sensors as a safety mechanism for miners. So mostly in underground mines today, we have either people tagged and equipment tagged, and based on how precise we can measure within that harsh environment, we obviously want to keep those two things apart from each other. It's now gone beyond that, and now we're into productivity as well. So we're working with software contractors as far as scheduling of trucks and other equipment, and all because you can sense and tell where people are. And that's a very harsh environment, very difficult environment to do that, because you can just imagine the radio waves underground and how you have to deal with that. We've been sort of put on as a gold standard. In a year, we've gone from about 40 mines worldwide to almost 80 mines worldwide as a deployment. There's only a few countries in the world where it's a requirement. So here in Australia is one, US is another, and we're starting to see that in other parts of the world. So, but we've got deployments in South Africa, Russia, China, so pretty much worldwide today. That same design that we use there for that whole system that I mentioned and deployed to you is now being deployed into other areas. So first of all is railway safety. And in that end market, it's exactly the same problem that you have in mining, which is, again, from a safety perspective. We're tagging workers as well as trains. And we're now in 7 cities in the US deployed, and that'll double over the next year or so, as well as manufacturing areas that need to have the same aspects, which are essentially, people safety, actually measuring equipment, and doing things like predictive maintenance, et cetera. The other market that's been a big driver for us, again, doesn't look like there's much synergy here, but is in livestock health. So we've partnered with a company in the pharma space called Zoetis, who's one of the largest animal pharma companies in the world. And here what we've developed is essentially a tag that tags onto a dairy cow, again, transmits the data to the station, and then we do analytics based on that. And we've teamed up with them on some pretty advanced analytics to actually predict when an animal will get sick. So there's lots of methods out there to do it after an animal gets sick, but we get about 3 days advance notice based on things like chewing, again, that we measure as to, how the jaw is moving, other actions as far as laying down, moving, those types of things. Pretty sophisticated system. We're in about 500 farms today, and I wouldn't be surprised if that number would double in the next year or so. We've shipped 2 million of the ear tags into the marketplace, and that's just expanding. That technology, and again, the application of those sensors to that analytical model on the software side is also driving us into other markets like healthcare. So we're trying to do the same thing, and we're deployed in a few hospitals today, of actually trying to predict before a person would fall out of a bed, things like that within a hospital environment. So the technology is very applicable. The key point there is it's a combination of this very precise movement and understanding, and then other sensors that can help out. I earlier mentioned that we're working on gas sensors. So our MEMS group in Boston will build sensors that will get deployed into these systems. So in both applications, in mining, there are gases that we want to be able to detect that are harmful to people. So again, you'd want to tag that on a person. And then in livestock health, a similar thing with animals. There are harmful, obviously, gases that exist that impact that as well. All these markets are quite large. While we have I'll call it a subcomponent in those markets, we continue to expand out with the strategy of providing a more fuller solution set to be able to go to customers. And this is just, I tried to go just slightly deeper without going too far, but in one of the emerging markets that I mentioned is manufacturing. You can see that we do things along as, tracking assets and people, but the safety aspects of things, but then the productivity is where we really get the return on investment, or the customer gets the return on investment, where we do certain process optimizations, as I mentioned, tools earlier, and other types of data. And that's really the key thing here with the whole Internet of Things, is actually being able to build useful information that can be used and applied to automate and effectively impact the processes. The key aspect that we've done this past year is moving to be able to deliver a full system. So we had the components. I discussed the MEMS sensors. So that in itself is generating revenue on its own. And then the deployment of the systems is generating it. But what's been critical for us is how do you tie those things together with software? And lots of analytics need to happen closer to the endpoint. So if you want to do things in real time, you have to be running analytics locally. And that's what we're calling 360 edge analytics. We're one of the few people that are actually building real sensors with real analytics at the sensor. And then what you can wait till later, there are applications that you can wait till later where time doesn't matter. You can do in the cloud, or you can do on premises. So that's been a big driver for us. So if I sort of look at the bottom here, in fiscal year 19 that we're finishing now, we had more of a hardware model where you sold chips, modules, and the anchors, and then just software had location. As we go into fiscal year 20, we're doing more tag development. You saw the different types of tags. Examples there, again, even in mining, there are different types of tags. Some people put tags into the cap lamps that the miners have. Some put it on their vests. Some have a radio. It's in the radio. So each one of those is a different type of tag that we need to support. But what's key for us has been developing the software and the analytics piece, and that's adding value. And frankly, it's a whole lot more lucrative from a margin perspective for us, as well as the value we create for customers. And so we're moving kind of the model from being a fully CapEx-oriented model to being an operating expense model, so we get continuous revenue more on a subscription basis. So we would deploy the systems and then charge on a monthly basis. We've started deploying that way on some test cases today. It'll have some impact in fiscal year 20, but it'll still only be maybe 15, 20% of the revenue for the year. So, just a quick summary is, we saw significant growth this past year, about 70%. Obviously, the base is low, but we're growing now into the next year, which will also have a significant growth year for us. We're operating or will be operating in fiscal Q1 of 2020 on a profitable basis. And then the markets we're addressing are quite large, and we're adding significant value from the sensor piece all the way through to the system deployment. And we have quite a good pipeline of new opportunities to support this revenue growth and kind of support the business as we move forward. And the uniqueness that we bring goes back to the MEMS development we do in the sensors, which is, again, very difficult and unique, all the way through to the software that we provide on the analytics side of things. And you'll start to see, again, some of the business shifts for us is to be more of a, from a service, platform as a service environment than just pure hardware sales. All right.